unknowing up and down time that we've got going on.
Yeah. I think for me, we are considered healthcare, and so there was never any risk of me having to shut my clinic at all. Those precautions were already in place from the get go since I opened when it was already happening. So the precautions have always been there. The heavily sanitizing. My space is only small enough to see one person at a time anyway. So none of my patients ever come into contact with each other. It's really just making sure that the space is cleaned between people and making sure that I'm doing the necessary precautions of masking up and washing my hands before and after I see people, before I and after I touch people. And let's see, you asked me what challenges I faced. I think the biggest challenges were that, when we were kind of going in and out of the purple tier zone that we've been in California, I think we came out of it and then we went back, at least in my county, we went back into it back in, I want to say, like November or maybe December. And I noticed that a lot of people canceled their appointments at that point, or canceled, or weren't feeling comfortable enough to come in. And so I think that was kind of the biggest challenge, is that all this time, I mean, I'd say at least for the first years of practice, I'm going to be building clientele. That's just kind of a given in what I'm doing. But to kind of see that drop off after I'd kind of, had these 6, 7 months of like consistent, steady growth, just to see it go back, I think that was, a little discouraging. But I really just tried to keep in mind that, I haven't even been doing this a whole year, and I'm doing pretty well for having just started. I think my biggest fear was just kind of the financial setback. But aside from that, I mean, you just got to keep on keeping on. And I knew that this was going to be part of the gig anyway. While building clientele, it just has a whole new element with the kind of the fear of COVID, and people's kind of want to avoid any kind of doctor office setting.
Yeah, because they think doctor's office, sick people, I go in, I'm going to catch it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So speaking of building clientele, how so are you considered like a specialist, or because it's not Western medicine, so it's not as mainstream as everybody, regular doctor's office. How would you classify yourself, or how does that work with like people's insurance or when people want to see you?
Yeah. I don't think I would call myself a specialist. I certainly specialize in certain areas, but this medicine treats so many broad, like such a broad spectrum of different things, that it was always of my intention to have just a as big of a tool belt as possible, so that I could help anyone who walked through my door. So I would say if I specialized in anything, it'd be more like pain management, which is very common in acupuncture. That's what it's probably most known for, is for managing pain. So I would say I specialize in pain management and women's health problems, especially. Being a woman myself, that was always something of interest in me, and something that, has been passed down from my mom and what she does as well. Beyond that, I'd say mental, emotional, digestive problems, stuff like that. Those are a couple of the things I also just tend to see the most, naturally. I don't take insurance. I know a lot of practitioners do. I decided not to take insurance at this point because I really didn't want the headache of it, to be honest with you. And just, there's so much kind of power that you give up in allowing the insurance company to dictate what your value is for what you do, and for how many treatments they'll cover for a patient. So it's
Oh,
more
okay.
like they get more control, and kind of like, well, you only get 2 treatments a month, so you just have to do your best. Well, if what if I need to see this person twice a week? That's not going to cover it. So I decided not to take insurance, but I compensate for that by kind of trying to keep my prices as low as possible. And I have a couple different package options available, just to kind of compensate for that.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I mean, you're honestly probably maybe the first doctor I've actually ever spoke to in this kind of format, so I wasn't sure how the insurance world works when it comes to being seen. Um, at risk of sounding political, would like universal healthcare be something that helps your business?
It's hard to say, because with that, I think again, whoever's establishing the protocols get to dictate how much my my medicine is worth, how much
Gotcha.
my
Okay.
what my tools are is worth. So um, it's hard to say. It's really hard to say, but I know that it would benefit far more people than I have to worry about it benefiting or not benefiting me. So I mean,
Right. 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 Yeah.
you know,
It's just one of those. Yeah. It's one of those questions because you always hear about how scummy the insurance companies are, and then from your point of view now that this first time I'm really hearing about how they dictate basically what they can cover, what you're worth versus, a system where everybody's okay to go in and you still get paid a decent amount. But once again, it just depends on how the system is working.
yeah, it
Um,
depends on the insurance company too, especially for sure, because different insurance companies value it differently, and it's ever changing because acupuncture is still fairly new as far as being covered by insurance, and we're still really arguing with the insurance companies to try to get to a point where we can compromise both for the practitioner and for the insurance companies.
and when, what are some of the things while you were going through school that and studying traditional Chinese medicine? Because once again, this is just one of those things that I mean, not it's not very mainstream in the sense of America. What were some of those like wow factors that kind of took you by surprise when you were learning, if you have any?
Oh, so many. I mean, especially in my first year of schooling, it was just like I felt like I was going to Hogwarts. Like seriously, I'd go to class and we'd get to talk about energy, and we'd get to talk about like these natural processes that occur that then you apply to the body, and it just makes so much sense when you see it in nature and then you see it in the body. And it just like there was so many moments definitely in the first year where like me and all my colleagues, my classmates, they would just be like, holy cow, I can't believe I get to learn about this kind of stuff, and I get to go to school for it, and then I get to practice it as a medicine and teach other people about it. Like, yeah, it was really amazing. I think that probably wore off after the first year when everything started getting a lot more harder.
Yeah.
As far as the education side of things, it really got challenging in a lot of different parts, but always worth it, always enjoyable, and always kind of feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
And when you started your practice, or actually when you decided to go down the Chinese medicine route, was there any pushback from like your parents who are pharmacists who I'm sure specialize in Western medicine and or any of your colleagues? Because I know that the medical field and community is somewhat of a not a tight knit circle, but it's pretty broad. But there's a community there. Is there any pushback that they were like, "Hey, that stuff doesn't really work. It's kind of woo ha, kind of."
Yeah. I didn't get any pushback from my parents or my family. Fortunately, they're always very supportive, and they knew I was going to do what I was going to do regardless. So they hopped on board and they were all about it, and they enjoy learning about it too. So I'm really grateful for that. As far as like just talking to people in everyday life, it's like I tell them, oh, I'm at the time I'm in school to be a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, and I'd always get this different array of like facial expressions ranging from like awe to like what the hell is that to like just pure confusion. um so that was really interesting, just talking to people about it and seeing all the different reactions. But most commonly it was awe for sure, because they're just like, what is that? I want to know more. um, I think the area where this medicine sees the most pushback is from Western doctors. A lot of them just don't know much about acupuncture. They don't know what it's good for. They haven't read the scientific studies, and then they just want to jump right to, well, that doesn't work. And I hear this from patients all the time. Like they'll come in and say, oh yeah, I told my doctor that I was getting acupuncture and he laughed at me. And So that's really where I see the biggest pushback. I don't let it get to me because I just know that it's coming from a place of cognitive dissonance, of them not understanding and not being open minded enough to seek more research and look into it. Um, but that's really the area where I think this medicine gets the most pushback, is just from other Western doctors, and we're required to learn a lot of Western medicine because it really is about integrative medicine, about integrating the two, and we have to really speak both those languages as far as our Eastern terminology that we use in our diagnosis and our thought process, and the Western terminology that they use. So I mean, it'd be awesome if Western doctors had to learn at least a little bit of what, some of our terminology, but maybe one day we'll see.
Yeah, maybe they'll stop prescribing nothing but opioids and pills to solve people's ailments rather than going the traditional way of, non-addictive drugs and things of that nature. Because
Yeah. And most people that I see, especially for pain stuff, they'll be like, I told my doctor I was in pain and they just told me to take 3 ibuprofens 4 times a day or something like that. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. And but there were no other options. They didn't give me any other options. So it's definitely something I see a lot. And so many, we're in a day and age where I think it's like 130 people die a day from opioid overdose. So there's like no better time for an alternative like this that has been proven effective through clinical studies, through scientific studies, which I know is really important for people to see that it is backed by science.
and what are some of the ways that we can get people more on board with traditional medicine versus the stuff we see every single day, since the insurance companies are so big and hospitals are so big into the Western medicine and just trying to just give a pill for everything. You know what I mean? It's I would assume it's really hard to combat that marketing, I guess you can call it.
Hmm. I think the best way is through education. People tend to knock what they don't know anything about, especially if it is from a different culture and from a different world.
Yeah.
So, through talking about it, through education, through normalizing it, through doing things like this, like what you're doing, reaching larger audiences that um, people can feel like they connect to it, and they connect to the person who's doing it and see the passion there and see the belief there, and go with it, and then having an open mind enough to say, well, I want to try it and see how it works, and giving it a valid shot. One thing I see all the time is people will say, oh, I tried acupuncture once and it doesn't work, or it didn't work, and it's like, well, you wouldn't take one round of antibiotics and say it doesn't work. You take the full round. You take it for those 10 full days. It's similar with acupuncture. Every treatment is accumulative, and depending on the severity and the type of ailment that you have, it's more than likely going to take more than one treatment, and it's going to take consistency, and it's going to take showing up for yourself and showing up to your appointments to make the difference. One time, that's not going to cut it.
Right, right. And speaking of like vaccinations and just medicine in that sense, with COVID going on and things of that nature, what are your thoughts on the vaccine? There's a lot of people out there who are just like, I'm not going to take it because whatever reasons they have, it hasn't been tried enough, it hasn't been out long enough. How, as a doctor of Chinese traditional medicine, would you later, what's your opinion on that?
You know, I'm sure I could go and get the vaccine if I wanted to, being a healthcare worker. I have not yet sought after that. And my patients ask me a lot, like, oh, are you going to get the vaccine? And I always just kind of stay the steady course of saying that there's not enough research to outweigh the unknowns that could come from a potential adverse reaction. And I know that no matter what vaccine it is, it's not a one size fits all. There's always going to be people more compromised. There's always going to be people with allergies or whatever it is that their bodies just don't tolerate it. So I don't think that a world, a national mandate would be beneficial to the people. I think it would probably be more harmful, if anything, in taking away medical freedom. I'm all for medical freedom. I believe to each their own. It's your body, it's your choice. Um, for myself, I will not get the